The massive crystal towers of Zephyria Prime stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Deep beneath the imperial capital, in the most secure archives of the Galactic Empire, Admiral Kane Morrison walked through endless rows of data, crystals that held the secrets of 1,000 conquered worlds. The air hummed with the soft blue glow of preservation fields, each one protecting knowledge that could reshape civilizations or destroy them entirely. Kane had been searching for 3 days now. His clearance as a senior Imperial officer gave him access to files that most beings in the galaxy would never see, but what he sought was buried deeper than most secrets. The old keeper, a withered Vorthik named Zilks, had mentioned it in passing during their last conversation about restricted sectors. A single word that had made Kane's human blood run cold. Earth. The data crystal he finally found was ancient, its surface clouded with age and bearing the warning symbols of a dozen extinct civilizations. Kane's hands trembled slightly as he placed it into the reader. The text that appeared was written in Old Kethmoran, a language that had been dead for over 10,000 years. Fortunately, Kane had studied the ancient tongues during his early years in Imperial service. The translation made his heart pound against his ribs. Warning to all who venture into the void, it began. In the outer spiral, on the third world of a yellow star, dwells a species of such terrible adaptation that they must never be disturbed. They call their world Earth, and they call themselves human. Kane sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. He had been born on Earth 37 years ago, in a place called Montana. He remembered the wide skies and endless grasslands, the way the snow capped the mountains in winter, and the smell of his mother's cooking. He had left all of that behind when the Imperial Scouts had found him during a routine survey mission. They had offered him a choice: serve the Empire and see the galaxy, or watch his whole world burn from orbit. It had not been a difficult decision. The warning continued, describing humans in terms that made Kane's skin crawl. These beings evolved on a death world where every living thing seeks to kill every other living thing. The very air burns there. Lungs, the water freezes solid for half the year, and massive storms tear across continents with the force of orbital bombardments. Yet they not only survived, but thrived. Kane read about how humans had conquered their entire planet, not through superior technology, but through persistence and violence. They had hunted the largest predators to extinction for sport. They had fought wars that killed millions over patches of dirt and abstract ideas. They had created weapons capable of destroying their entire world, then somehow managed not to use them. Most disturbing of all, the warning stated, is their pack-bonding behavior. A human will die for another human they have never met, simply because they share the same species designation. They form emotional attachments that override logical self-preservation. When one human is threatened, all humans consider themselves threatened. They do not surrender. They do not negotiate from weakness. They hunt. The document went on to describe failed contact attempts by 3 separate civilizations. The hegemony of worlds had tried to establish peaceful relations 12,000 years ago. Their diplomatic mission had been welcomed, studied carefully, and then systematically destroyed when the humans realized the hegemony's true intentions involved strip mining Earth's resources. The survivors reported that humans had learned their technology, copied their weapons, and then improved upon both before launching devastating counterattacks against hegemony worlds. Kane's mouth went dry as he read the final section. We recommend that the coordinates of this system be classified beyond the highest security levels. Earth and its inhabitants represent an existential threat to galactic civilization. They possess an intelligence equal to our own, housed in bodies designed by evolution for warfare. They reproduce rapidly, adapt quickly, and never forget an enemy. If they ever reach the stars, they will consume everything in their path. The crystal's databanks contain detailed biological scans of humans from those ancient encounters. Kane stared at his own species' anatomy through alien eyes. What he saw horrified him. Every aspect of human physiology was designed for violence. Their forward-facing eyes for tracking prey. Their endurance capabilities that allowed them to run down larger animals over vast distances. Their hands capable of both delicate manipulation and crushing force. Their teeth designed to tear flesh, but it was the psychological profile that truly shook him. Humans possessed something the report called pursuit-predation mentality. They did not give up, ever. A human tracking prey would follow it for days, weeks, even months, until it collapsed from exhaustion. They formed what the analysts called revenge cycles, where injuries to their pack were repaid with interest. Across generations, Kane's communicator chimed, interrupting his reading. The message was from General Vex Thorn, his immediate superior, and one of the most decorated warriors in the Calaxian military caste. Morrison, report to my office immediately. We have new orders from the Imperial Command. Kane carefully encrypted the data crystal and slipped it into his uniform. As he walked through the gleaming corridors of the military complex, his mind raced. The Empire had been monitoring Earth for over 2 centuries now. Their intelligence reports consistently described humans as a primitive species barely capable of spaceflight, confined to their single world, and constantly fighting among themselves with crude chemical weapons. General Thorn's office occupied the top floor of the tactical center, its transparent walls offering a panoramic view of the capital city below. Thorn himself was impressive, even by Calaxian standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall with the characteristic blue-gray skin and pronounced cranial ridges of his warrior caste. His forearms moved with precise military efficiency as he gestured to the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. Admiral Morrison, Thorn said without turning around. Your expertise regarding the human homeworld makes you invaluable for our next operation. Kane's blood turned to ice water. What operation, General? Thorn activated the display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. A red targeting reticle highlighted a small yellow star system on the outer rim. Earth system. Operation Harvest, Thorn announced with satisfaction. Imperial Command has decided that the strategic value of the Sol system outweighs the minimal threat posed by its primitive inhabitants. Kane forced his voice to remain steady. General, with respect, our intelligence on human capabilities may be incomplete. Thorn's laugh was like rocks grinding together. Morrison, I understand that sentiment regarding your birth species, but facts are facts. Humans have been monitored for centuries. They cannot even establish permanent colonies on their own moon. Their fastest vessels would take them decades to reach the nearest star. They spend more resources fighting each other than they do on technological advancement. The general pulled up tactical displays showing Earth's current military capabilities. Crude chemical rockets. Nuclear weapons that were barely more advanced than firecrackers compared to Imperial technology. Nations that couldn't even agree on basic planetary policies. The entire planet could be pacified by a single Imperial battle group. Kane thought about the ancient warning hidden in his uniform, about pursuit predators and pack bonding, about species that had made the mistake of underestimating humans before. General, perhaps we should reconsider. The Outer Rim territories aren't going anywhere. We could postpone this operation until what, Admiral? Thorn's voice carried a dangerous edge. Until the humans develop fusion drives? Until they discover hyperspace? The Emperor has decided that Earth's location makes it strategically vital for controlling the outer spiral arms. Its inhabitants will be offered the standard choice: integration into the Empire or extermination. Kane nodded slowly, knowing that. Further argument would only raise suspicion about his loyalty. When do we depart? The first fleet assembles at Proxima Station in 1 week. You'll be serving as cultural advisor aboard my flagship. Thorn finally turned to face Kane directly. I trust this won't present any personal conflicts for you, Admiral. Kane met the general's gaze steadily. Of course not, General. I serve the Empire. As Kane left Thorn's office, his mind was already racing through possibilities. He had 7 days to figure out how to warn Earth without committing treason against the Empire that had given him everything. 7 days to somehow prevent the most powerful military force in the galaxy from discovering that the ancient warnings were true. 7 days before the Galactic Empire learned why Earth had always been a forbidden zone. 3 months had passed since Kane Morrison discovered the ancient warning buried in the Imperial archives. Now he stood on the bridge of General Thorn's flagship, the dreadnought Eternal Victory, watching through the viewport as Earth's solar system grew larger on the tactical displays. The Imperial First Fleet had emerged from hyperspace beyond Pluto's orbit, their massive warships casting shadows across the ice and rock of the outer planets. Commander Lisa Hayes stood at the helm of the diplomatic vessel, Sovereign's Pride, a sleek cruiser designed specifically for first contact scenarios. Her orders were simple and had been repeated countless times throughout Imperial history. Offer the primitive species a choice between peaceful integration or complete annihilation. Hayes had conducted 17 such missions in her career, and every one had ended the same way. The primitives either surrendered immediately or died fighting with weapons that couldn't even scratch. Imperial hull plating. Hayes was confident this mission would be no different. The intelligence reports on humans painted them as barely advanced, beyond Stone Age mentality, despite their crude technology. They still used chemical rockets to escape their gravity well. They still fought wars over patches of dirt and invisible lines they drew on maps. Most telling of all, they couldn't even agree on basic planetary governance, splitting themselves into nearly 200 separate political entities that spent more time arguing with each other than advancing their civilization. Kane Morrison watched the diplomatic vessel begin its approach toward Earth and felt his stomach twist into knots. He had spent the past 3 months trying to find ways to warn his homeworld without committing treason, but every plan he developed fell apart under scrutiny. Imperial communications were monitored too closely for him to send unauthorized transmissions. His access to ship systems was limited by his advisory role. Most frustratingly, he couldn't even be certain that anyone on Earth would believe a warning about an alien invasion, even if he could somehow deliver one. The first sign that something was wrong came from the sensor arrays. Lieutenant Vax, the ship's Calaxian sensor officer, turned toward General Thorn with confusion evident in his 4 eyes. General, we're detecting unusual electromagnetic patterns from the inner system. The humans appear to have gone completely silent. Thorn moved to the sensor station, his massive frame towering over the equipment. Explain silent, Lieutenant. All radio transmissions from Earth ceased approximately 12 hours ago, sir. Their communication satellites have gone dark. Even their primitive internet networks show no activity. Vax's fingers danced across his controls, bringing up more detailed scans. It's as if the entire planet simultaneously decided to stop communicating. Kane felt ice water flowing through his veins. This was not the behavior of a primitive species facing the unknown. This was the behavior of a military force implementing communications blackout protocols. Somehow, impossibly, Earth knew they were coming. General Thorn dismissed the concern with typical Calaxian arrogance. Probably some sort of primitive religious panic, or perhaps their governments are arguing about how to respond to our presence. It matters little. Commander Hayes will make contact with whoever claims to speak for them. The Sovereign's Pride continued its approach toward Earth, broadcasting standard Imperial greeting protocols, on all frequencies. The message was simple and had been translated into dozens of human languages. Greetings from the Galactic Empire. Prepare to receive diplomatic representatives for important negotiations regarding your world's future. Kane watched Earth grow larger on the display screens and felt a strange mixture of homesickness and terror. The blue marble looked exactly as he remembered it from his childhood, with its swirling white clouds and brown-green continents. It looked peaceful and defenseless, hanging alone in the black void, like an easy target for the massive fleet surrounding it. The response from Earth came exactly 18 hours after the Imperial fleet's arrival. Broadcast on multiple frequencies in perfect Imperial standard. The voice was calm, professional, and completely unafraid. Imperial Fleet, this is Captain Ben Carter of the Earth Defense Command. We are prepared to receive your diplomatic representative at the following coordinates. Kane nearly staggered at those words. Earth Defense Command. Not the United Nations, not any of the individual governments that Imperial intelligence had identified as Earth's primary political entities. A unified military command that hadn't existed in any of their reports. Moreover, the response came in perfect Imperial standard, a language that Earth wasn't supposed to know existed. General Thorne noticed none of these details, focused as he was on what he saw as a primitive species, finally showing proper respect for Imperial power. Commander Hayes, proceed to the designated coordinates. Standard first contact protocols are now in effect. Lisa Hayes guided the Sovereign's Pride down through Earth's atmosphere, marveling at the planet's natural beauty despite her professional focus. The designated coordinates led her to what appeared to be a military installation built on a large island in Earth's Pacific Ocean. The base was clearly designed for this meeting, with landing pads that perfectly accommodated Imperial vessel. Dimensions and communication arrays that shouldn't have existed in a primitive civilization. Captain Ben Carter was waiting when Hayes and her diplomatic team disembarked from their shuttle. He was tall for a human, with short dark hair and the kind of calm confidence that Hayes had only seen in veteran Imperial officers. What struck her immediately was his eyes. They showed no fear, no awe at meeting representatives of a galactic civilization. Instead, they held the cold calculation of a predator evaluating potential threats. Commander Hayes, Carter said, somehow knowing her name, despite the fact that Imperial intelligence insisted Earth had no knowledge of their fleet's command structure. Welcome to Earth. I trust your journey was comfortable. Hayes felt the first stirrings of unease, but maintained her diplomatic composure. Captain Carter, I bring greetings from His Imperial Majesty and an offer of great importance to your species. Carter gestured for them to follow him into the base's main building. The hallways were clean, efficient, and filled with technology that definitely shouldn't have existed on a primitive world. Hayes noticed security cameras with designs that looked suspiciously similar to Imperial surveillance systems. Though somehow more advanced, they entered a conference room where Carter took his seat across from the Imperial delegation. Hayes began her standard presentation, activating a holographic display that showed the scope and power of the Galactic Empire. She explained how Earth could join this great civilization, how humans could find their place serving the greater good of the galaxy, and how this opportunity represented the greatest moment in human history. Carter listened politely until Hayes finished, then leaned back in his chair with what might have been amusement. Commander, before I respond to your generous offer, I have a question. Did Admiral Kane Morrison happen to mention anything about ancient warnings? The words hit Hayes like a physical blow. Morrison's name wasn't supposed to be known to anyone on Earth. His defection to the Empire had happened decades before any Imperial contact with this system. There was no possible way this human could know who he was, let alone his connection to Earth. I see from your expression that he did not, Carter continued. That's unfortunate. Kane was always a good man, even after he left us. I had hoped he might have found the courage to warn his new friends about what they were walking into. Hayes found her voice. How do you know Admiral Morrison? Carter's smile was cold as winter steel. Kane Morrison was born in Montana. He left Earth 37 years ago, when your scouts gave him a choice between service and watching his world burn. We've been expecting him to come home ever since. The conference room's doors sealed with a soft hiss, and Hayes realized that. Her shuttle crew hadn't responded to her last communication check. Carter activated a wall display that showed dozens of human vessels surrounding the Sovereign's Pride, ships that had somehow appeared without triggering any Imperial sensors. Commander Hayes, Carter said softly, you and your crew are now prisoners of the Earth Defense Command. You will be treated according to the laws of war and will not be harmed as long as you cooperate. However, I need you to understand something. Very important. Carter leaned forward, and Hayes saw something in his eyes that made her blood freeze. It was the look of something that had never been prey, something that existed at the top of its world's food chain, and knew it. Your people were warned to stay away from Earth. The warnings were very clear about what would happen if anyone disturbed. U.S. Now you've made this personal. Carter activated his communication device. Send a message to the Imperial fleet. Tell them they have 24 hours to leave our system. After that, we're coming for them. Hayes stared at the human captain in shock. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea what you're challenging? The Imperial First Fleet has enough firepower to turn your entire planet into glass. Carter's expression didn't change. Commander, your intelligence reports told you that humans are a primitive species barely capable of spaceflight. Your intelligence reports were wrong about a lot of things. Kane Morrison could have told you that if you'd bothered to ask him about the warning. General Thorne stared at the communication from Earth with disbelief turning rapidly to rage. 24 hours to leave the system or face consequences from a primitive species that still used chemical rockets. The very idea was so absurd that several officers on the bridge had begun laughing when the message finished playing. Thorne was not laughing. Consequences, the general repeated slowly, his forearms flexing with barely controlled fury. These primitives dare to threaten the Imperial First Fleet. Kane Morrison stood quietly at his advisory position, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. The ancient warning had described humans as persistence predators, creatures that never gave up once they decided something was a threat. Captain Carter's message wasn't empty bravado. It was a hunting declaration. General, Kane said carefully, perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal. The humans may have capabilities we haven't fully assessed. Thorne turned his massive frame toward Kane, his expression dangerous. Admiral Morrison, I understand your emotional attachment to your birth world, but sentiment has no place in military decisions. These humans have made the gravest mistake in their species' history. They will learn the price of threatening the Empire. The general activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships prepare for orbital bombardment. Target their major population centers. When they see their cities burning, they'll remember why primitives don't challenge civilized powers. Kane watched in sick fascination as the Imperial fleet moved into bombardment formation. 200 of the galaxy's most advanced warships aligned their weapons toward the blue marble hanging helplessly in space. Each vessel carried enough firepower to level continents. Together, they could turn Earth's surface into molten glass within hours. The bombardment began exactly 25 hours after the Imperial fleet's arrival. Streams of coherent energy lanced down from orbit, targeting the coordinates of Earth's largest cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, all of them marked for destruction in the Empire's standard pacification protocol. Then something impossible happened. The energy beam struck Earth's atmosphere and stopped. Lieutenant Vax stared at his sensor readings in confusion. "General, the bombardment is having no effect. Some kind of planetary defense screen is deflecting our weapons." Thorne moved to the sensor station, his confidence wavering for the first time. "Explain deflecting, Lieutenant." "The entire planet appears to be surrounded by an energy barrier, sir. Our bombardment is being absorbed and dispersed harmlessly into space." Vax's fingers danced across his controls, trying to make sense of the readings. The power requirements for such a system should be impossible for their technology level. Kane felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. The humans hadn't just been hiding their true capabilities. They had been preparing for this exact scenario for generations. Every piece of intelligence the Empire had gathered was either outdated or deliberately misleading. The first wave of human ships appeared without warning. One moment space around Earth was empty, except for the Imperial fleet. The next moment, thousands of vessels materialized from seemingly nowhere, pouring out of hidden bases on asteroids, moons, and deep space installations that Imperial sensors had never detected. Captain Sarah Bell led the Earth Defense Fleet in tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging fire with energy weapons, the human ships closed to point-blank range and began ramming attacks. They turned space battles into brutal close-quarters combat where superior technology meant less than raw aggression and willingness to sacrifice. "They're insane," breathed Lieutenant Vax as he watched human fighters ram themselves into Imperial destroyers. "They're deliberately destroying their own ships." Kane shook his head slowly. "They're not destroying their ships, Lieutenant. They're boarding." The truth of Kane's words became clear as human vessels latched onto Imperial hulls like parasites. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Teams of humans in armored suits cut through Imperial hull plating with tools that seemed primitive but were devastatingly effective. They moved through ship corridors like apex predators stalking prey. Commander Jake Phillips led one such boarding team onto the Imperial dreadnought Conquest of Stars. His team of 12 humans faced over 300 Calaxian warriors in the ship's corridors. But the humans fought like nothing the aliens had encountered. They used psychological warfare, turning the ship's own lighting and communication systems against the crew. They moved in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's actions with an almost telepathic understanding. Most disturbing was their adaptation speed. Phillips and his team encountered Calaxian energy weapons for the first time in their lives. But within minutes, they had figured out how to use captured weapons more effectively than their original owners. They learned the ship's layout faster than beings who had served on it for years. They seemed to understand Imperial technology by touching it. The boarding action ended when Phillips walked onto the bridge and calmly informed the Calaxian captain that his ship now belonged to Earth. The captain, a veteran of 50 battles, looked into Phillips' eyes and saw something that made him surrender without firing another shot. On Earth's surface, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Torres led resistance cells that emerged from underground networks spanning entire continents. When Imperial landing parties touched down expecting to find terrified primitives, they instead found themselves hunted by something far more dangerous. The humans moved through their own terrain with perfect knowledge, setting traps and ambushes. That turned each landing zone into a killing field. Torres and her teams didn't just fight the Imperial soldiers. They studied them. Every captured weapon was reverse engineered within hours. Every prisoner was questioned with scientific precision, their knowledge extracted and disseminated to other human units. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that learned and adapted faster than should have been biologically possible. Most terrifying was the humans' approach to warfare itself. They didn't seek glory or honor. They didn't waste time with elaborate strategies or ceremonial combat. They simply identified their enemies and eliminated them with the efficient brutality of apex predators, removing a threat to their territory. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical displays with growing horror as Imperial ship after Imperial ship went dark. The humans weren't just winning individual battles. They were systematically dismantling the First Fleet with a precision that suggested they understood Imperial tactics better than Imperial officers did. "General," Kane said quietly, "we need to retreat, now." Thorne's pride warred with the evidence of his eyes. Half his fleet was either destroyed or captured. The humans had revealed defensive capabilities that rivaled anything in the Imperial arsenal. Worse, they were broadcasting detailed intelligence about Imperial fleet positions and capabilities to their entire planet, suggesting a level of coordination that shouldn't have been possible for a species that supposedly couldn't even agree on planetary government. The final straw came when human forces captured the dreadnought Infinite Glory, General Thorne's own flagship. Commander Jake Phillips walked onto the bridge with the same calm confidence that Captain Carter had shown during the diplomatic meeting. He wasn't there to gloat or make demands. He was there to deliver information. "General Thorne," Phillips said politely, "we've extracted the navigation logs from your captured vessels. We now have the coordinates of every major Imperial world, including the location of your shipyards, supply depots, and command centers." Thorne stared at the human in shock. "What do you want?" Phillips smiled, and Thorne saw the same predatory calculation that Hayes had reported from her meeting with Carter. "We want you to leave our system and never come back. But more importantly, we want you to deliver a message to your Emperor." The human activated a holographic display showing star charts of the local galactic region. Red markers appeared on dozens of systems, marking Imperial worlds and installations. "Tell your Emperor that humans have been seeding the galaxy with sleeper agents for over 2 centuries. Every major world in your empire has human operatives in place. They've been waiting for someone to make the mistake of threatening Earth." Phillips leaned forward, his expression hardening. "You attacked our home. That makes this personal now. We're coming for your empire, General. Not to conquer it, but to evaluate whether your species deserves to survive." The human turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and General? Admiral Morrison sends his regards. He wanted you to know that the warnings were real. Earth was always meant to remain a forbidden zone. You should have listened." As Phillips left the bridge, Thorne realized that everything the Empire believed about humans was wrong. They weren't primitives struggling to reach the stars. They were apex predators who had been patiently waiting for someone to give them a reason to hunt. The surviving Imperial ships began their retreat, but Thorne knew it was already too late. The humans had star charts, Imperial technology, and most importantly, they had been preparing for this war for generations. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth had always been marked as forbidden. News of the First Fleet's defeat at Earth spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by the few surviving Imperial ships that had managed to escape the human onslaught. On every major world of the Empire, the reaction was the same: disbelief, followed by rage. The idea that a primitive species from the outer rim had destroyed 200 of the galaxy's most advanced warships was simply impossible to accept. Emperor Zax himself stood before the assembled Imperial Council on the throne. World of Dominion Prime, his ancient form trembling with fury as he read the reports from General Thorne's surviving officers. The Emperor had ruled the galaxy for over 3 centuries, crushing dozens of rebellions and incorporating thousands of species into his empire. Never in all that time had any primitive world dared to resist Imperial authority. "Cowards," the Emperor declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. These officers disgraced their uniforms with tales of impossible human capabilities. A single planet defeating the First Fleet? Orbital defense systems that can stop Imperial bombardment? It's clear that fear has driven them to fabricate excuses for their own incompetence. Admiral Krex, the Empire's most senior military commander, stood to address the Council. His scarred Vorthic features bore the marks of 100 battles, and his reputation for tactical brilliance was known throughout the galaxy. My Emperor, while the reports seem incredible, we cannot ignore the physical evidence. 200 ships and their crews are gone. The survivors describe human technology that shouldn't exist. Emperor Zax's laugh was cold and bitter. Technology? Admiral, our intelligence reports describe humans as barely capable of spaceflight. They still use chemical rockets to escape their gravity well. They fight wars with primitive kinetic weapons. Their fastest ships would take decades to reach the nearest star. Are you suggesting that such primitives somehow developed weapons capable of threatening Imperial vessels? In the depths of the Imperial archives, Admiral Kane Morrison sat alone with the ancient warning crystal, its text glowing softly in the dim light. He had returned to Zephyria Prime aboard one of the few ships that escaped Earth's solar system, and now he understood why the warnings had been written. The humans hadn't been hiding their true capabilities out of fear. They had been waiting. Kane accessed his personal files and began searching through decades of intelligence reports about Earth. What he found made his blood run cold. Every major piece of information the Empire had gathered about human capabilities was either outdated by centuries or had been deliberately fed to Imperial agents by humans themselves. The primitive rockets, the internal conflicts, the apparent inability to achieve faster-than-light travel, all of it was an elaborate deception. The truth was buried in reports so old that most analysts had dismissed them as ancient history. 300 years ago, Imperial scouts had detected strange energy signatures from Earth's solar system. Exotic matter manipulation that suggested experimentation with space-time distortion. The signatures had appeared for several months, then vanished completely. The official assessment was that the humans had attempted to develop advanced technology and failed catastrophically. Kane now realized the humans hadn't failed. They had succeeded and gone silent to avoid attracting attention. For 3 centuries, they had been developing technology in secret while feeding the Empire false information about their true capabilities. Every Imperial survey mission had been carefully managed to show the humans exactly what the Empire wanted to see. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Helen Stone stood before an emergency session of the United Nations, but this wasn't the divided and argumentative body that Imperial intelligence had described. The humans in the assembly hall moved with military precision, their faces grim with the knowledge of what was coming. Stone herself was nothing like the weak political leaders that Imperial reports had suggested ruled Earth's various nations. Fellow citizens of Earth, Stone began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. For over 2 centuries, we have maintained the deception that our world is primitive and divided. That deception has now served its purpose. The Galactic Empire has shown their true nature by attempting to destroy our cities and enslave our people. Stone activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy in 3 dimensions, with thousands of red markers indicating Imperial worlds and installations. The intelligence we gathered from the captured Imperial fleet confirms what our deep cover agents have been reporting for decades. The Empire is a parasitic civilization that conquers primitive worlds, strips them of resources, and enslaves their populations. They have done this to over 10,000 species across the galaxy. The President's expression hardened as she continued. They made one critical mistake. They attacked Earth. They threatened our children, our families, our way of life. That makes this personal for every human being in the galaxy. Colonel Rick Davis, head of Earth's Deep Space Intelligence Division, stepped forward to address the assembly. Davis was a lean man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, but his voice was steady as he revealed secrets that had been kept for generations. The Empire believes they are facing a primitive species that got lucky in one battle, Davis said. They don't understand that we have been preparing for this war since the day their first scout probe entered our system. Every human being who left Earth in the past 2 centuries was part of this preparation. Every apparently random exploration mission was actually a strategic placement operation. Davis activated his own display, showing human settlement patterns across the galaxy. What appeared to be scattered colonies and trading posts was actually a carefully planned network of bases and safe houses. We have operatives on every major Imperial world. Some, like Admiral Morrison, openly defected and joined Imperial service. Others maintained deep cover identities for decades, becoming respected members of Imperial society while feeding us intelligence about their technology, military capabilities, and strategic weaknesses. The Colonel's smile was cold as winter. Steel. The Empire has been fighting imaginary enemies for centuries, while the real threat was living among them, learning their secrets and waiting for the right moment to strike. Captain Lucy Ward led the first wave of sabotage operations across the galaxy, coordinating with human sleeper cells that had been dormant for decades. On Korath 7, the Empire's primary shipyard, human operatives who had worked as maintenance technicians for 20 years suddenly revealed their true purpose. They didn't just sabotage Imperial vessels. They completely destroyed the shipyard's ability to produce new warships, using their intimate knowledge of Imperial construction techniques to cause maximum damage. Commander Pete Young coordinated similar operations across a dozen worlds, targeting communication networks, supply depots, and command centers. The humans didn't attack randomly. They struck with surgical precision at the Empire's most vulnerable points, using intelligence gathered over centuries of patient observation. What made these attacks truly devastating was their coordination. Human agents across the galaxy moved, simultaneously striking hundreds of targets within hours of each other. Imperial commanders found themselves cut off from their superiors, their supply lines severed, and their communication networks in chaos. On Dominion Prime, Emperor Zax watched his empire beginning to crumble as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Shipyards destroyed, communication relays sabotaged, entire fleets stranded without fuel or supplies. What should have been isolated acts of terrorism were revealing themselves as part of a coordinated campaign that spanned thousands of light years. How is this possible? The Emperor demanded. How could primitives from a single world coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy? Admiral Krex studied the tactical reports with growing horror. My Emperor, the attack patterns suggest these operations were planned decades in advance. The humans would need agents in place on every major world, with detailed knowledge of our most secure installations. The realization hit both leaders simultaneously. The humans hadn't become a threat overnight. They had been a threat for centuries, hiding among Imperial citizens and learning everything about the Empire's weaknesses while appearing completely harmless. Admiral Morrison entered the throne room at that moment, still wearing his Imperial uniform, but carrying the ancient warning crystal in his hands. My Emperor, he said formally, I request permission to brief you on the true nature of the human threat. Emperor Zax stared at the human officer who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. Morrison, what do you know about these attacks? Kane held up the crystal, its ancient warnings glowing softly in the throne room's light. Everything, my Emperor. The humans have been planning this war since before I was born. Every human who ever left Earth was part of their strategy. We've been living among you, learning from you, and preparing for the day when someone would make the mistake of threatening our homeworld. The Emperor's expression shifted from rage to something approaching fear. You're one of them. Kane nodded slowly. I was born on Earth, but I've served the Empire loyally for 37 years. I hoped that service would protect my homeworld from Imperial expansion. I was wrong. He placed the crystal on the Emperor's throne. They were warned, my Emperor. 6 months had passed since the Imperial First Fleet's destruction at Earth, and the galaxy had learned what it meant to be hunted by apex predators. The Galactic Empire, which had ruled unopposed for over 1,000 years, was collapsing as human forces systematically dismantled everything the Empire had built. But this wasn't a war of conquest in any sense that civilized species understood. This was something far more terrifying. Captain Dan Ross led the human expeditionary force as they visited world after world, conducting what Earth's leadership called species evaluation. The humans didn't arrive with massive fleets or ultimatums. Instead, they came in small groups, studied each species carefully, and then made decisions that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. On Veloria Prime, Ross and his team spent 3 weeks observing the peaceful Valorians, a species of plant-like beings who had been conquered by the Empire 2 centuries earlier. The Valorians had never fought back against their imperial oppressors, choosing instead to endure slavery rather than risk violence. When Ross finally made contact with their leaders, his message was simple. You are under human protection now. The Empire will never threaten you again. The Valorians received advanced human technology, defensive systems, and a promise that any species attempting to harm them would face human retaliation. It was the same offer extended to dozens of peaceful species across the galaxy. Protection in exchange for nothing more than a commitment to live without harming others. But species that had willingly participated in the Empire's brutalities faced a very different fate. On Korath 7, the former site of the Empire's primary shipyard, Captain Ross met with the Korathi Military Council. These were beings who had eagerly joined Imperial expansion, using their technological skills to build weapons for conquering peaceful worlds. They had grown rich and powerful by helping enslave entire species. Ross studied the Korathi with the same clinical detachment that a biologist might use to examine a dangerous virus. Your species chose to become predators, he told their leaders. You built weapons designed to kill beings who had never threatened you. You grew rich by selling tools of oppression to the Empire. The Korathi military leader, General Vecht, tried to negotiate. Captain Ross, we were merely following Imperial orders. We can change, adapt to new leadership. Humans are clearly the dominant species now, and we're prepared to serve your interests instead. Ross shook his head slowly. That's exactly the problem, General. You don't understand the difference between serving and choosing to do right. You're predators by nature, and predators can't be reformed. He activated his communication device. Execute species termination protocol. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human forces didn't simply attack Korathi worlds with overwhelming firepower. They hunted them. Small teams of humans tracked down every Korathi settlement, every hidden base, every refugee group with the patient persistence of apex predators following wounded prey. Within 3 months, the Korathi species was extinct, eliminated with the same clinical efficiency that humans had once used to drive dangerous animals extinct on their own world. The galaxy watched in terror as similar fates befell every species that had eagerly participated in Imperial brutality. The humans made no speeches about justice or revenge. They simply identified threats to galactic peace and removed them with ruthless efficiency. Admiral Kane Morrison, now openly serving as humanity's liaison to surviving Imperial forces, found himself explaining human psychology to beings who couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. You have to understand, he told a gathering of terrified Imperial governors, humans don't conquer for resources or territory. We protect our pack and eliminate threats. By attacking Earth, The Empire triggered something that can't be negotiated with or reasoned away. Morrison stood before the holographic display in the conference room aboard the human flagship Retribution, surrounded by the remnants of Imperial leadership. Every human who ever left Earth was part of our species' survival strategy. We spread across the galaxy not to explore or trade, but to ensure that no threat could ever destroy our homeworld. When you attacked Earth, you attacked every human in the galaxy. The surviving Imperial leaders struggled to understand human motivations. Governor Thex of the Rigel colonies, a Calaxian who had ruled 17 worlds, asked the question that haunted them all. What do you want from us? Tribute? Submission? What are your terms for peace? Morrison's expression was almost pitying. Governor, you're still thinking like an empire. Humans don't want to rule you. We want to evaluate whether your species deserves to continue existing. The words sent chills through every being in the room. This wasn't conquest or subjugation. It was judgment by a species that had appointed itself the galaxy's apex predator. Commander Megan Fox led human forces as they reached the imperial capital of Dominion Prime, the throne world that had ruled the galaxy for a millennium. The planet's massive orbital defenses, which had never been breached in 1,000 years of warfare, fell silent as human ships approached. The few remaining Imperial defenders had already surrendered, unwilling to face the species that had systematically destroyed every force sent against them. Emperor Zax waited in his throne room as Fox and her escort of human soldiers walked through corridors that had once symbolized absolute power. The Emperor was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, and he had ruled through cunning, fear, and overwhelming military superiority. Now he faced beings who were immune to all three. Emperor Zax, Fox said formally as she entered the vast chamber. I bring a message from the President of Earth and the United Human Defense Command. The Emperor, still wearing his ceremonial robes, despite the collapse of everything he had built, maintained his dignity even in defeat. Speak your terms, human. What tribute does your species demand for sparing my people? Fox activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Human-controlled space now encompassed nearly half of all inhabited systems, with the remainder either under human protection or marked for evaluation. We don't want tribute, Emperor. We want you to understand what you've created. The display shifted to show species distribution across human-controlled space. Peaceful civilizations were thriving under human protection, their populations growing, and their technologies advancing with human assistance. But dozens of predatory species had vanished entirely, eliminated when they proved unable to coexist peacefully with their neighbors. Your empire conquered through fear and brutality, Fox continued. You turned the galaxy into a place where the strong devoured the weak and called it civilization. That ends now. Emperor Zax stared at the human commander with something approaching awe. You're not conquerors. You're gardeners. You're pruning the galaxy of species you consider unfit. Fox nodded slowly. Every ecosystem needs apex predators to maintain balance. For too long, this galaxy lacked that balance. Species like yours grew fat and lazy, oppressing others without consequence. That created an unstable system that was bound to collapse eventually. The Emperor leaned forward in his throne. And what of my people? What judgment have you passed on the Calaxians? Fox's expression softened slightly. Your species has potential. Many Calaxians were simply following orders, caught up in a system they didn't create. But others, like General Thorne and his supporters, chose to embrace brutality as a way of life. Those individuals will face judgment. The rest of your people will have the chance to prove they can live peacefully. As Fox spoke, her communication device activated with a priority message from Earth. President Helen Stone's voice filled the throne room, carrying the authority of a species that had just declared itself the galaxy's dominant force. Emperor Zax, Stone said formally, The human protectorate is prepared to offer the surviving Calaxian worlds a choice. Your species can join the new galactic order as protected members, following the same laws that govern all peaceful civilizations. Those who choose violence or oppression will be eliminated. Those who choose peace will be defended. The Emperor absorbed this information, understanding that he was witnessing the birth of a new type of galactic civilization. What laws govern this new order? Stone's response was simple and absolute. No species may prey upon another. No civilization may enslave or oppress beings weaker than themselves. Resources are shared according to need, not the ability to take them by force. Conflicts are resolved through mediation, not warfare. Those who violate these principles face human intervention. Emperor Zax realized that the galaxy would never again be the same. The humans hadn't just conquered the Empire. They had fundamentally changed the rules by which civilizations interacted. And if species refused to accept human authority? Fox answered before Stone could respond. Then they'll learn why Earth was always supposed to remain a forbidden zone. 6 months later, Admiral Kane Morrison stood in the Imperial Archives on Zephyria Prime, updating the galactic database with new information about humanity, the ancient. Warnings about Earth were being replaced with current assessments that would serve as guidance for any civilization that might one day chaw.